Welcome to TranZfuture. I'm Dr. Mark Goebel. I'm a specialist in treating ADHD and bad behavior in general. Now you're probably asking yourself, is my child really ADHD? And I'm about to turn that question on its head. What you need to be asking yourself as a parent is my child ADHD or super sensitive? Now I've got 15 years of clinical and empirical research under my belt. And what I found, as I said before, completely turns the question, is my child ADHD, on its head. So this is what I found in my research. ADHD, or any other conduct disorder, is very complex to diagnose. At the end of the day, it's down to the clinical judgment of the specialist evaluating your child. So it's completely and totally subjective. Now, 80% of the children that I've treated over the years have been misdiagnosed with ADHD. What I've found is with these misdiagnosed children is they usually just have a few emotional imbalances that are provoking ADHD-like symptoms and therefore are being misinterpreted in the diagnosis. So, caution, great caution to you as a parent. Don't be too quick to accept the diagnosis of ADHD. ADHD can be a very damaging label for your child. It can affect their self-esteem greatly. It's like a huge weight on their shoulders, and it can also provoke social torment from peers or bullying. So be very careful before you label your child with ADHD. Research shows us that with this label, it can be very damaging. So for example, I have had cases where children have slipped into major depression because they think something's wrong with them, and they've even tried to take their lives. They've actually tried to attempt suicide. It's a very serious matter. 70% of young offenders in prisons or institutions, or young offenders institutions, are filled with ADHD youth, supposedly. So you really are playing with fire here. But don't worry, I've got some good news for you. It could just be that your child is multisensory or super sensitive. This is a positive thing, opposed to having a neurological dysfunction or ND in the prefrontal cortex or the PFC, which is usually what ADHD is. It's a neurological dysfunction in the PFC. So it can be a chemical imbalance or there can be some physical damage in that zone. If you have those two things, then you more than likely do have ADHD. If you don't have ADHD. It's more than likely that you're actually going to be super sensitive. So what do I mean by super sensitive? Super sensitive means all senses are activated at the same time and are highly receptive. So a good example of this is when a child is talking in class to a peer whilst the teacher's talking. Now this appears to the teacher as a distraction, as if the child is not paying attention. But when the child is questioned by the teacher what was just said, the child can tell the teacher exactly what was said. Now this can cause great problems for the child because they come across as being distracted or distracting. I'm going to give you another example. You might be having a very quiet discussion with your other half in another room, and your child can be watching television in another room. Now somehow your child has managed to hear every single word you've said and will tell you so. They may come into the room and interrupt. Oh, well, why are you talking about me? And we're like, well, how did you hear that? It's because they have super sensitive hearing. I've devised a super sensitive checklist which can help you identify whether your child is super sensitive and not ADHD. I'm going to share that with you now. On your screen you're going to see this checklist and we're going to go through each point one by one. So let's get started with the super sensitive checklist. First point. Can your child detect whether you're upset but you're trying to put on a brave face? That's to say, they can see through the brave face and feel and see that you are truly upset. Just answer yes or no. Second, Is your child easily affected by the emotions of others? As I say, when someone's really sad, does that sadness affect your child? 3. Is your child able to perceive your thoughts or the thoughts of others? So they know exactly what you're thinking, even though you haven't told them. 4. Does your child pick up on everything that has been said, even when it appears he or she is not listening? 5. Does your child have a great ability in sport or art? 6. Does your child worry about others, especially animals or plants? They get very distressed when something happens to an animal or to a plant. Does your child know exactly what he or she does or doesn't want? And finally, 8. Does your child talk very directly, but with wisdom that's beyond their ears, as if a wise old man is talking to you? Okay, so those are the 8 questions for this checklist. Now, if you've answered 5 questions with a yes, then that means that your child is most definitely going to be super sensitive and not have any neurological dysfunction. Now, if you answered 2 to 4 of the questions with a yes, it's likely that your child has an above average sensitivity, which again is a positive thing and not a negative thing, and it is easy to cultivate and take advantage of. If you answered yes to 2 to 4 of those questions, it is likely that your child has an above average sensitivity, which is a very positive thing and something that can be worked with. If you answered only 1 question with a yes or none, it is very probably that your child is not super sensitive. But it doesn't mean that your child automatically has neural or neurological dysfunction. The best way to determine whether or not your child has neurological damage or dysfunction is to have an EEG, a magnetic resonance, and a neurochemical imbalance study. If all 3 of those studies come up with evidence that suggests that there is some sort of dysfunction, then you know it's more than likely your child may well have ADHD. In my clinical experience, it's very rare that a child has both neurological dysfunction and is super sensitive. It's usually one or the other. Now, my program TranZfuture can modify your child's behavior and enhance the school performance regardless of whether the child is super sensitive or has neurological dysfunction. Either way, we can help your child. Now, neurological dysfunction is harder to treat, but it by no means is impossible to treat. And we've had hundreds of cases where we have treated it successfully. Don't worry, either way we can help your child. Now, I'm sure most of you watching this video are much more inclined to see and perceive their child as super sensitive, especially after the checklist. We've treated over 1,000 cases with TranZfuture, and only 20% of those have actually had ADHD or neurological dysfunction. Believe me, you don't need to go down the ADHD route. I urge you to go down the super sensitive route first. And then after that, if the program hasn't worked, then you can look to whether your child does actually have ADHD. But first, go down the super sensitive route. Now, if you want to find out more about the program, just send me an email and take a step towards a new, brighter future for your child. I look forward to transforming you and your child's life soon.